o'clock. People have been very, very anxious to get here. We're still worrying about getting another group of people coming from the hotel. So if you just bear with us, be a little bit patient, we're going to start the program now. And in the order of things, we will have Dr. Wode Kite, the Western Region President, doing the evocation and libation.
Hotep. It's indeed a good thing to see so many black folks together. Isn't it? So it is. Before beginning, I would love to ask the permission of our elder sister, Aline, to commence these proceedings this day. Permission is granted, and we will go forward. This morning, I would like for each of us to share in the words of the ancients out of the Nile Valley, out of ancient Kemet, Egypt. And I would like for each of you to share both in the Meduneter and the English language as we transliterate from the ancient texts. I would like for you to repeat after me, but perhaps we should all, if it's okay for you to stand, I would prefer if we be in a standing posture. I am going to say the Meduneter. I'll take it sections at a time. I'll do both the Meduneter and then the English. You'll repeat the Meduneter after me and the English so that you'll know what it means. Nuk punuk, nuk. I am in very truth I am.
I am in very truth I am.
Zu amaku,
Zu amaku.
A shining being and a dweller in light.
A shining being and a dweller in light.
Kemam keperu,
Kemam keperu.
Who has been created and has come into existence.
Who has been created and has come into existence.
Em neterhua,
Em neterhua.
From the limbs of Netera.
From the limbs of Netera.
Nuk hua em enu, Nuk hua em enu. I am one of those.
I am one of those.
Ensu,
Ensu.
Shining beings.
Shining beings.
Amusu,
Amusu.
who dwell in the light.
Who dwell in the light.
Amen Ra Sutaneter.
Amen Ra Sutaneter.
The hidden sun rules supreme.
The hidden sun rules supreme.
Ankh Ujet Seneb.
Ankh Ujet Seneb.
Life, strength, and health.
Life, strength, and health.
As the ancestors have come to us from the east, as we've had beings such as Heteru, such as Ra, such as Ma'at, such as divine beings as Mena, who united the land around 4,100 years before the Christian era. We come to you today in the tradition of the ancient ones, and we are going to very briefly pour libation as we've come from the east. Hotep. We will call this direction west. Libation to the ancestors. We will turn around to the direction facing south. Libation to the ancestors. Answers north. Sister Nzinga, is there anyone for whom you would want libation poured?
My mother, Elizabeth Price Parker.
For Elizabeth Price Parker, we pour libation. Our elder, is there anyone for whom you would like libations poured? Richard E. Aline, for you, we pour libation. And for all of the ancestors who perished in the Middle Passage, for all of the ancestors who continue to perish even now, we pour libation. Hotel. Amen is satisfied.
And now we will have words from our illustrious and dynamic elder, Queen Mother Irma Eileen.
Hotep, everyone. Dr. Clarke, may I have your permission to speak, please? Thank you. Dr. Clarke has put forth this rhetorical question over and over again and has given us the answer, or made us answer as best we can. However, I don't think that there would be a better place for me to repeat the question again and again and have answers stated time after time after time, one more time. The title of one of Dr. Clarke's articles, an edition of the City Sun, asks the question, can African people save themselves? Can African people save themselves? The question immediately leads me to the children. And the question, how, what, where, when, and why? If our children are going to be our salvation and progeny, if they are the ones who will carry forth whatever good or evil we've started, they would then have to know what they need in order to be saved from what, and then why, and then how. Therefore, first of all, do you know where are your children, where they are intellectually, spiritually, etc., right now? Do you know this? How do we get to know the levels, the heights, and depths of our children? By what they are doing, by what they're saying, by what they're not saying, with whom they are interested in or interacting with. How are ours, theirs, yours, communication lines set up and used? How much confidence is there in the communicable information exchanged? Do we really know our children, and do they know us? How are we revering ourselves and our children, and who are their role models? These are some of our hard questions that need to be flushed out, in my view. Possibly, one way to begin to analyze the situation could be to tune in to Dr. Clarke's summation of his article, Can African People Save Themselves?, which appeared in the City Sun a few months ago. And the article, the caption of the article reads, Can African People Save Themselves? If we are to save ourselves, and this is Dr. Clarke's statement, If we are to save ourselves and to deliver a truly free Africa into the 21st century, we must first become friends and allies of all African people everywhere. We should begin by becoming allies of ourselves. To start this process, I suggest you find a mirror and do not move away from that mirror until you like the person that's staring back at you. You should say to that person staring back at you, you and I are going to change the world, and we know we cannot change the world until we first change ourselves.
That's right.
That's Dr. Clarke. That's Dr. Clarke. He also has said, history is a clock that people use to tell their political and cultural time of day. It is also a compass that people use to find themselves on the map of human geography. The role of history is to tell a people what they have been and where they have been, what they are and where they are. And the most important role that history plays is that it has the function of telling people where they still must go and what they still must be and do. Another area that Dr. Clarke has covered, along with thousands of others, but these are two that I've picked out. This is conclusion here, and it is African history should be taught every day, not only in the schools, but also in the home. African History Month should be every month. We need to learn about all the African people of the world, including those who live in Asia and the islands of the Pacific. In the 21st century, there will be over 1 billion African people in the world. We are tomorrow's people, but of course, we were yesterday's people too. With an understanding of our new importance, we can change the world if first we change ourselves. Now, a positive change comes, and there's positive interaction and communication. Therefore, I'd like to read for you, what shall we tell our children who are black? And I would prefer to use the term, who are African. What should we tell our children who are African of what it means to be captive in their dark skins? What should we tell our dear ones, fruit of our wombs, of how beautiful they are when they are faced with abhorrence of everything that is black? A black cow gives no milk. A black hen lays no eggs. Days that don't go well and are referred to as the black day. Magic that is bad is black. Storm clouds are black. Devil food is black, and so is the boogeyman. What shall we tell our dear ones? Feared in a white world, a place where white represents all that is good, pure, fine, and decent, where the clouds, dolls, angels, and God is white. What can we say, therefore, when our children come home in tears because a playmate has called them black and ugly, nappy-headed, thick-lipped, and flat-nosed? What will they think when we dry their eyes and whisper, yes, that's true, but you're no less beautiful, my dear, no less beautiful? How shall we lift up their heads, getting them to square their shoulders, looking their adversaries in the eye, showing confidence in having knowledge of that heritage, serene within their sable skin, and proud of their own beauty? What can we do to give them strength and direction, that they may come through life's adversities as a total person, unwarped in a world with biased laws and inhuman practices, where they must survive? For who knows, perhaps this black child bears the genius to discover the cure for cancer, or any of these other diseases which are coming up on us. Or chart a course to explore the universe. So he, she must survive for the good of all humanity. They must and will survive. Lately, I have drunk from the fountain of my black culture, and I sat at the knee and learned from Mother Africa and discussed the truth of my heritage, the truth of us, most often obscured and omitted. I find that we have much to say to our children. We shall lift up their heads, declaring they be proud of their blackness, telling them the story of their fathers and their fathers' fathers. We shall take them back in time when we as kings and queens ruled the Nile. We measured the stars and discovered the laws of mathematics and religion. Upon our backs, the wealth of 2 continents have been built. We will tell them this and more. Our heritage shall be their weapon and armor, making them strong enough to win any battle that they may face. And since our story is often obscured and omitted, we must sacrifice to teach it to our children. As we sacrifice to feed, clothe, and shelter them, so this we must do for them if we love them. No one will do this for us. No one. In years to come, behaving because we armed them with the truth, our children and their children will venerate us, for it is the truth that will set us free. Finally, we have a message to the black family from Dr. Gerald Dees. We were and are a people of many colors. Like a patchwork quilt, we were held together with stitches of pride. And finally, another message for the African family. If our children don't remember who their ancestors were, we must not let them forget that they were a dignified and spiritual people, and that learning, living, and being productive starts in the home. Protect.
Words from our elders, words of wisdom and inspiration. Thank you, Sister Eileen. We'd like to now have Sister Esther Brown please come and lead us in the Black National Anthem. Lift every voice and sing. There should be a copy in your program book. Now we want everybody to sing real strong. If you don't know the words, just kind of do your mouth like this. Does everybody know the words? Raise your hand if you know the words. If you don't know the words, get a copy from the people who know the words. I want to welcome Sister Esther Brown to the conference and also say thank you now in deep appreciation for leading us in our Black National Anthem. Everyone please stand.
Just before we begin, I have gotten permission from the ancestors who are going on.
Teach.
And now, I would like to get permission from all the elders, all the children, and all the mothers to sing one verse of the National Black Anthem. And I'm going to introduce you to another song, another anthem. It's sung to the tune of "We Are Climbing Jacob's Ladders." And the first verse says, We are building up a new world.
All right. I like that.
We are building for our fathers.
Yes.
We are building for our mothers. You just follow me.
All right.
We're going to do one verse
All right.
of Lift Every Voice and Sing.
Teach.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
All right. Hotel.
We are building up a new world. We are building up a new world. We are building up a new world. Africans must be strong.
That's right. That's right. All right.
We are building for our fathers. We are building for our fathers. We are building for our fathers. Africans must be strong. We are building for our mothers. We are building for our mothers. We are building for our mothers. Africans must be strong.
We are building for eternity.
We are building for our children. We are building for our children. We are building for our children. Africans must be strong. Keep on
We are in fact building. We're building for eternity. And with that in mind, we're going right into the next program. What we'd like to do now is have Brother Barry come to the stage. And then, I don't know, because when I don't have my glasses on, everything is a blur. And when I have them on, everything is a glare. But did I just see... Did I just see Dr. Ben walk in, y'all? Last night we did a tribute to the elders, and in honor of Dr. Ben, his wife also stood in for him. And we all know that one day, you know, we too have to get this age. And so there's a person who's standing right in line. He hasn't quite made it yet, but I would like to call him to the stage for giving us the legacy of ASCAC others. Would you please come and join us on the stage? Okay. We got it going on at St. Rocco's, huh? I'm now going to turn the program over in able hands to a brother we've been working together for a couple years now. We met each other several years ago here in the Eastern region, but a very, very capable brother. The brother's, I mean, like too awesome. He's melting away in front of my eyes. I'm kind of a little envious about that. But with all due respect, a brother who's dynamite, a brother who works hard for African liberation, a brother who I will now turn the program over to and entrust that he will be in good hands, and that is Brother Richard Berry.
Hotep, sisters and brothers. First, I will ask Sister Irma, my mother, will you allow me to speak this morning? Thank you, for your permission. You know, we're really having a good time in New Jersey today. I'm enjoying this. We all, I know, are enjoying this powerfully. I am one of the state representatives for New Jersey, and this is a powerful pleasure for me to have all you beautiful Africans here in Newark, New Jersey. And there's been so many pleasures this morning for us having the fortunate opportunity to be able to introduce him to you today. And I will get started with that because I know we're running with time. The speaker who begins our session is our most illustrious African elder who needs little introduction to the African world community. His grasp of the great currents of world history generally and African history in particular is unequaled. Dr. John Henry Clarke has been a leading activist and prominent figure in the struggle for African liberation for over 50 years. Over this period of 2 generations, he has been a prolific writer and editor who has published over 50 short stories in this country and abroad. His articles and conference papers on African and African American history and culture have been published in leading journals throughout the world. Dr. Clarke has written or edited 23 books, which include Malcolm X, The Man in His Time, William Styron's Nat Turner, 10 Black Writers Respond, Harlem, USA, Marcus Garvey, and The Vision of Africa, and his latest contribution, Notes for an African World Revolution, Africans at the Crossroads. He has written forewords and prefaces for some of the great works of African history. The authors of these range from J.C. DeGraff Johnson and J.A. Rogers to John G. Jackson and Sheikh Anta Diop. Dr. Clarke has been a professor of African Studies at Hunter College and visiting professor of African American History at the Africana Studies and Research Center of Cornell University. He was founder and first president of the African Heritage Studies Association, a member of the Black Academy of Arts and Letters, also of the African American Scholars Council, and is presently the chair of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations National Council of Elders. Dr. Clarke, again, has often said that history is a clock that people use to tell their special time of day, to tell them where they have been and what they have been, where they must go and what they still must be and do. He himself has been like this clock, to tell us what time it is in our history, to tell us it is time for the liberation of our African humanity throughout the diaspora, and time for the inner transformation of our African being to a new level of consciousness and understanding of ourselves and our ancient African legacy. Dr. Clarke has labored long and hard in these things to help educate and transform us to set in motion a new order for African people across the world. It is a great honor and an extreme pleasure to introduce to all of us here today our eloquent elder, Dr. John Henry Clarke.
Thank you. In putting together the book Notes for an African World Revolution, I tried to look 2 ways at the 19th century and at the 20th century. I tried to point to the fact that we have missed the message of the 19th century, that the African activists and revolutionists of the 19th century delivered a message, and by missing that message, things went wrong in the 20th century. And when we look at the early part of that 20th century, both in Africa, both in the Caribbean islands, and in the United States, we acted as though no message had been delivered, as though we had to invent the wheel and discover water all over again. And we were meeting again at the fork of the road in history, reading the signboards the wrong way. We are still doing the same thing. In my short remarks, I am not speaking for applause. My best days on this earth and my most useful days on this earth was as a classroom teacher. I will address you as what I am, a classroom teacher. Now let's look at this 19th century revolution in the African world and how we failed to make that connection in the 20th century that starts the confusion that we have now in the closing years of the 20th century, asking simple questions about what we shall do, when in the 19th century these activists knew exactly what to do. They fought for the equipment, the time, and the opportunity. They knew where the door was, but if they could get through the door, they would know what to do. And they did not argue about who's a Methodist, who's a Protestant, and who's a Muslim, because that wasn't an issue then. We have dissipated so much energy over a fakery of history. And the formation of religions from spirituality is a fakery. People took from spirituality, downgraded spirituality, formed it into religions, turned one against the other, and used it as a rationale for their crimes, and turned it into a male chauvinist murder cult. Through this, they began to reclassify people. And they began to use this to justify their criminal intention toward other people. I am saying that the African Methodist Episcopal Church, when it was found, was not anti-Baptist or anti-Methodist or anti-anything. We began to develop anti-movements other than to unify all movements for the total liberation of all of our people. Now, when we look at that totality of the 19th century, let's look at Africa, realizing that the system of chattel slavery grew unwieldily, and the British and others was changing that system into the system of colonialism, another form of slavery. And that awakening led to 100 years of revolution, when Africans who had never heard of a military school or wore a store-bought shoe went to the field and out-generaled some of the finest men in Europe. If you've forgotten this in the 20th century, you've forgotten that you're supposed to take some action when a goddamn coward policeman shoot down one of your children. Because you cannot connect with this 19th century, you suffer confusion in the 20th century. Because the 20th century was the culmination of the image conquest. And the main reason you can't fight your white enemy is that you look at your white God and you think that if you touch him, you're also touching the relative of God. Yeah. You can kill another black man for brushing against your freshly shined shoes. And you can call him the vilest name you can think about. And yet, you lost the nerve when you see that white face. Because you are prison to that image. This is because you do not know the heroic acts of of this African revolution in the 19th century, you have not taken time out to read about the Asante Wars, the Zulu Wars, the wars in East Africa and the Sudan led by Muslims. All Muslims in Africa were not Arabs, and all were not cop-outs, and all were not fools talking about Islam is the black man's true religion. God made the first Arab, made the first Muslim, his name was Adam. They were talking no nonsense like that. Muhammad Ahmed in the Sudan unified the Sudan. He didn't ask who was a Muslim. He was a devout Muslim. And yet he unified the Sudan, drove the British out of the Sudan, and the Sudan remained free for 11 years until the British sent in General Wingate and an army to retake the Sudan. Who wrote about it? Who recorded it? In one of the finest books of war reporting since Caesar came home from Gaul, a young British reporter named Winston Churchill recorded it in a book called The River War. When do we read something? When do we slow down? When do we go to these ancient texts? We're on an Africa kick, and there's so many of the major works on Africa written by Europeans we haven't even heard. Those blacks, we've heard about them. We paraded, we bride and used in our house as furniture. We haven't read of it. I've offended some people because I was at a home and people was parading Dr. Ben's work. They had most of them and quoting him wrong. When I find out that you're a bunch of liars, you ain't read none of it. Because if you read it, you will not come to that kind of misunderstanding of it. You haven't paid your own writer the respect of carefully reading their work. And their masterworks of inquiry by white writers you never heard of. You cannot get on a black thing or a white thing. I grew up in the South because I was small and inept in athletics. I became a referee. Because I was scared, I became the one who told others how to dodge the Ku Klux Klan. They always found something for me to do to take up for my weakness. They made me a professional thinker early in my life. My people found some way to make use of me. He can't fight worth a damn. He can't run worth a damn. What we gonna do with him? Let him think. So I dug into the books. Let's still hang into this African 19th century you have not tried to understand. The heroic caliber of the Zulu Wars. These wars lasted in some form 256 years. And when I speak of them chronologically, you have not read one book on one of them. Not even the bad books. Like a large book called The Washing of the Spears, the first American book. None of Father Kalino's Catholic priest who did some good work on the Zulu War, Father Kalino. None of Hugh Marshall Howe's work, best known work, The Passing of the Black Kings. His early work on the area was later called Rhodesia. The early work on Zimbabwe. I have lived through so much And I hear so many words, so much ceremony and no substance. And when do we slow down and read? Do we understand the making of the modern Congo, now mistakenly called Zaire? Do we understand the nature of Alfonso? Have we read Alfonso's letters? No. Do we understand the democratic kingship of Shamba Belongongo? Do we understand the Congo miracle? They drove the Portuguese out in the 1590s and stayed free until 1884 and 85, right in the midst of the slave trade and in spite of the slave trade. And yet when you look at Africa, everybody was a slave. Less than a third of Africa was hit by the trade. Then from the north, have you dealt with the Arab slave trade in east and in the north? Have you dealt with the slave trade from the north into West Africa? Now you say you can't take Whitey's word. Who's done any good work on it? John Henrick's work is the best new work on the subject. Who's done any good work on North Africa? You have to deal with Africa in revolution in its different parts. Got to deal with the Asante Wars. Now the Asante people of Ghana, the Akan people, never conceded that any conqueror had a right to rule them. Their mentality was so intact, it was logical that they would emerge as the first of the independent states in West Africa. They had the mentality, they had the cohesion. And although they had fights between them, they never fought each other into extinction. The fight stopped short of that. So the long bitterness, hard to heal, that you have in Nigeria between the House of Fulanis, the Igbos and the Yorubas, wasn't built up. Nigeria was supposed to be Africa's great industrial nation. It has the manpower, it has the technicians, it has the lawyers. So if a great industrial nation was to emerge in Africa, it should have been Nigeria. But why didn't it emerge? It didn't have the cohesion. To have cohesion, you have to have peace. And you cannot have a person say that, I ain't going to speak to that old Igbo. I ain't going to speak to that old Yoruba. In the house, I ain't going to speak to either one of them because they're not Muslims. Now you see where many times to be liberated, you've got to throw all religion in the garbage can, and liberation must become your religion. But you cannot walk the earth without spirituality. Without spirituality, you might as well dwell among the dogs because you are no different. It is spirituality that makes us human. We are the breed that thinks, or supposed to think. So I'm not knocking your religion, I'm knocking your concept, which was imported from someone else. I'm saying that at the end of the 19th century in Africa, Samari's wars were coming to a close on the Guinea coast, West Africa. In East Africa, an old warrior, Muhammad bin Abdullah Hassan, called the Mad Mullah of Somaliland, bringing his wars to a close. The British had reoccupied the Sudan and had killed off a man called the Mahdi, Muhammad Ahmad, who unified the Sudan. Behind him came the Fuzzy Wuzzies, who were not Muslims. His fiercest warriors were not Muslim, and he was a devout Muslim. What I'm trying to show you, while you divide yourself along religious and fraternity and lines, I'm saying that we have fought without this garbage. Each man chose his own religion, but in a common fight, we all won. And we got to get back to this. Now, at the closing years of the 19th century, the last Asante War fought by a woman, Ye Asante War. And when she took over from her cousin, Prempeh, and the British decided that they would go inland and take the golden stool. Where are the children's books about Ye Asante War? Where are the children's books about the bringer of the golden stool, Akomfo Anokye, who's the forerunner of the gynecologists? He was more than just he's a multi-talented man. We have produced a certain kind of multi-genius that other people have not come close to. He was minister of state. He was a magician. The method of bringing the golden stool, he was a magician. He pulled it out of the air. We got witnesses. A stool came out of the air and settled near the king. That 1,000 people said that's what happened. You can't say the stool didn't exist because I've seen it. It's there. It's still there. He became prime minister. He made war when he said, whosoever comes under the Asante umbrella and obeys Asante law becomes Asante and a part of the Asante state. The concept of tribalism gave way to the concept of state. This is the early fall of Ghana, of its independence. When we look at this and come down to the end of the 19th century, to Ye Asante War, who held it together after they exiled her cousin Prempeh, a young African politician, Casely Hayford, not read by this generation, started an agitation for the return of the royal family and converted that agitation into an agitation for independence. He lived until 1931 and produced some of the finest literature of liberation in West Africa. Gold Coast Native Institutions, Africa Unbound. But a work that needs to be read now, I wish Nelson Mandela would read it. The Truth About the West African Land Question. Getting across the fact that most Africans miss. In the African tradition, land can neither be bought or sold. It is the collective property of all of the people. You bet a bunch of slimy Europeans in Africa, in South Africa, own 87% of the land. And the bulk of the Africans are landless in their own country. And you're talking about apartheid, which is not the real issue anyway. Let's stop jobbing and talk about the real issue. The real issue is power and who holds it. The real issue is not sharing. The European shares nothing with you. Where power is concerned, he is not stupid enough to share power. You no more share power than you share your wife. Power is an exclusive thing for you and for you alone. This is the one thing I learned recently in Japan. The Japanese run Japan. And if you don't like the way they run it, they tell you where the airport is if you want to fly out and go.
All right.
2 atomic bombs, lost a war. But psychologically, they did not lose. Culturally, they did not lose. Because you could not take their self-confidence and their image of God as they conceived them to be. You better worry about this image. This image has killed you. This image has turned you on, one and the other. This image has started black male bashing and black female bashing to the point you think the option is white. But the option is stop playing the fool and choose each other. Now, when we look at the world revolution of the 19th century, and that's my main concentration, we have to look at the Caribbean area in South America. In the Caribbean area, you have some of the clearest revolutionary heritage of Africans outside of Africa. When you include Brazil, Palmeiras, and Bahia, and the Babis Revolt in Guyana, the so-called Bush Negro revolts across the top of South America. Why then, with all of these revolutions, why is it that Jamaica fought harder than Haiti and didn't become free? Jamaica fought over a longer period and was destabilized in between periods. Haiti fought over a short period and was not destabilized in between the periods. Each time they knocked down one leader, another one came back up. So the spirit of the revolution was not broken, even with the exiling and the death of the leader, until it culminated in a form of independence. Who killed that independence? Haitians arguing about the French way of life versus the traditional African way of life. When they opted for a French constitution and a French way of life and the maintenance of the French language, the revolution had been betrayed. When after 1850, when the mulattoes of Jamaica made a proposition to the British that if the British gave them special privileges, they would contain the blacks for the British and protect the British from the blacks. And when the British did not buy the deal, some of them joined the blacks, notably Gordon. But gradually the British began to give them the deal on their terms. The British created and made Jamaica the most stratified nation along color and economic lines in the world. And they came down to the end of the 19th century, not boasting about their Africanness, but boasting about that degree of British blood, that degree of Scottish blood. And that killed their revolution, some of the most clearest revolutions outside of the hemisphere. And it's still to the point where I would say, with safety in a conference in Jamaica in 1987, Marcus Garvey is not in this place, and he's not in the Caribbean islands at all. And if he were alive today, walking the streets of Jamaica, some deranged Jamaican would stone him to death. The Jamaica of Seaga, you elect a Boston white con man as prime minister, and you tell me you produce Marcus Garvey? I said the most honorable thing you could do for Marcus Garvey is go to Kings Park, dig his bones up, throw it into the sea, get him out of here. You have dishonored him. You can't get your head straight on color. You can't run a nation because you can't unify. Because these various gradations pitted one against the other, have stagnated that nation. So we need a mental revolution. And we need to say some hard words about people who are in between, debating whether they should join their father's people or their mother's people. We need to say, if your white father will let you in his house, go with our good wishes. But if you're going to stay in our house, come in and work for our liberation, or go to your father's house and take your chances. Now this is hard, and this is a delicate time. And I know a whole lot of almost white blacks who put their life on the line as firmly and as strongly as the blackest of the blacks. So I'm not talking about all. I'm speaking in general of a group of people who are stagnating liberation, arguing over color gradations and hair gradations, arguing over phony associations we picked up away from home, not understanding that the slave ships brought no Deltas, AKAs. Brought no Jamaicans, brought no Trinidadians, brought no black Americans, no else. We pick up all these artificial tags, want to go to war with each other. He's not a Delta. She's not a Delta. She's an AKA. The most surprising thing ever happened to me that I was in a bridge game in Texas with one of the most beautiful women I ever had went around with, and I wanted to experiment. I don't like bridge anyway, it's too slow, and so I threw down the card just to see what would happen, and we lost the game. I said, didn't you know I was playing against the AKAs and Delta? It was a wall. I didn't know we were in a wall. And I had lost the wall for her by putting down the wrong cards. I could care a damn about which side won. All sororities, fraternities for blacks are artificial anyway. Once we stop dissipating the energy over all these artificial, all of these ceremonies that don't mean nothing. What I'm trying to say is that when we came down to the end of the 19th century, it was liberation for all. But early in the 20th century, we began to break ourselves down into different people. We became a Caribbean people, an invention. We became an African American people, another invention. And the Africans began to separate themselves based on what colonial master they had served under and what language that colonial master spoke. Another artificial approach to liberation. And as we came into the 20th century, we have forgotten the activists of that 20th century. We've forgotten the monumental journalists, T. Thomas Fortune, William Monroe Trotter. All this study of blackness, and never heard of Monroe Trotter, never heard of T. Thomas Fortune. People said that there was a fight between Du Bois and Washington. Never read Washington's Atlanta speech or heard it. Never knew the schools of thought, and yet they got so much opinion. Never read the minutes of these race conferences and London. Never dealt with the education of Marcus Garvey, a practical education, something that I admire because that's all I've got. Just go to the books, go straight to the books other than the universities. Don't have the fee anyway. Then go to the dissident books. When I'm saying that at the end of the 19th century, early the 20th century, the way had been charted. The Pan-African Congress, well on the way. The revolutions of Africa for 100 years. A literature had been created. Casely Hayford in Ghana with his Africa Unbound, Truth About the West African Land Question. Other Ghanaians, a work called Toward Nationhood in West Africa. Henrick and other Africans had charted a way. A great nationalist, Pan-African minister of Nigeria, forgotten now by your generation who didn't even get to know him, Majola Ajibabai, an African Pan-Africanist who was a minister. We have not looked at that. We have not looked at Bishop Turner, who was another African-American minister who was a Pan-Africanist and an African nationalist, better than most of the phonies you see today. Over and above. As we move into the 20th century, creating more ceremony than substance, but creating some able men that we still have not understood or read with any thoroughness. Randolph's major contribution toward the concept of an independent black approach to socialism, something most blacks still hadn't seriously considered, the fact that socialism did not start in Europe, not in Christianity. John Jackson has written good books on the subject. Nobody's reading it. I met 10 people who read John Jackson's Christianity Before Christ. I met less than 3 who read his last book, The Ages of Gold and Silver. I must have read 10 who read his book, Man, God, and Civilization. I'm saying that our own people had charted the way into the 20th century. Leo Hansberry had laid out an African program early in the 20th century, taught at Howard, 37 years. Nobody paid any attention to him. And the person that downgraded him most was Frank Snowden, still hanging around, giving trouble. We have not dealt with anti-black blacks. They walk among us and don't even get a scratch. We haven't dealt with the people who betrayed Fred Hampton in Chicago. The betrayers walk among you. We see him in the supermarket. We see him in the candy store. He's popularly safe. Nobody gonna hurt him. We don't do anything to traitors. We have to bring this people together in an international Pan-African effort for a total revolution of effort for freedom. We have to stop all the nonsense about who is a Muslim, who is a Baptist, and who is not, and who believes in Marx and who don't believe in Marx. You got to believe in freedom. Marx discovered absolutely nothing. African communalism existed before Europe existed. African social living existed before European socialism. St. Augustine, looking at the conference at Nicaea, said that these people are giving us a religion we had 3,000 years ago. Anybody inquire to what St. Augustine is talking about? Or you got a European concept of Christianity, you running with it. Throw the garbage in the can and go, that carbon copy, go back and pick up your original copy. Move from there. In conclusion, because there is no conclusion, because with a little encouragement, sometimes without it, a frustrated Baptist like myself, a preacher who never made it to the pulpit and an actor who never made it to the stage, with a little encouragement, we'll speak indefinitely, and we know that. So there is a point where we would have to start concluding. And what have I done with all these years I've been around? Fortunate enough to be active most of these years, over 50 years of direct activity, having time to clear up some of my own confusions. I early got in trouble with the Communist Party that I associated with for over 50 years. Associating with the Communist Party and belonging to the Communist Party, two different things. I was never a member of the Communist Party. The FBI will tell you that. Principally because they've investigated me enough. And yet I was very active in the party, got out when I wanted to, disassociated myself. I always thought Karl Marx was a political opportunist, a Johnny-come-lately, and a second-rate socialist. And that he was teaching absolutely nothing that wasn't there all along. I'm saying that we need to go back and examine some of our own teachers. We need to see what Booker T. Washington was saying and stop listening to Booker T. Washington through other people. We need to listen to what Du Bois was saying. Realize there was no fight between Du Bois and Washington. And the black Garveyites need to stop telling this damn lie about Du Bois responsible for Garvey. It's a lie. Du Bois didn't have that kind of power. Need to also stop telling the lie about black America. He came to give black America a program and they rejected it. The bulk of the money, the bulk of the membership of the Garvey movement came from black America. There's no way black America could have betrayed Marcus Garvey. The administration of the Garvey movement, the clerkship of the Garvey movement was 100% Caribbean. And you can get this information from the FBI too, who had people in the Garvey movement. We need to stop telling lies about ourselves, on ourselves. Garvey was betrayed by some of his own countrymen. The money was stolen by some of his own countrymen. This is documented. You can believe it or not believe it. The black American didn't take the money, didn't get that close to the money. It's also documented again in the 8 volumes on Garvey by Professor Robert Hill. I don't particularly like some of Professor Hill's conclusions because they're too conservative. But his monumental work is an achievement in research. It has not been duplicated. And his work should be read. At least the documents should be read. We should go back and be honest with ourselves. Du Bois' political conclusions were right. They were a little premature for the day. So there was never a question as to whether we would follow Du Bois or Washington. There was never a question which one we needed, because we needed both of them then, we need both of them now. The Garvey movement was the next logical step. And if we understood that, we would have understood Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X. And you cannot separate one from the other. in spite of the differences that came near the end. I don't think any movie or any book, there's not a single book on Malcolm X that has told the truth, and it's damn sure going to be told in a movie made by Spike Lee. Because his sexual interest is too tense. Because that beclouds looking at the man. In my talk with Spike Lee, I said, how are you going to capture Malcolm X's silences? Malcolm was also a great listener. He was a great student. He would listen to you talk intensely. And then he would gradually begin to interpret what you said to him and take it beyond what you said and begin to teach you. That's a good student. That's a learner. I don't think nobody can capture this on film. Or the good-natured man who loved his non-Muslim friends as well, who had a shadow cabinet of non-Muslims feeding him information. This is why he was so devastating on history. He hung out with the historical people who gave him folders of information. Always whacking me on the back and saying that, John, I'm going to give you 99. If you leave that swine alone, I'm going to give you 100. He still can't give Ben 100 because Ben going to hang out with that pork chop until the day he dies. I gave up the pork years ago, put on a decent diet, and thanks to a significant other. I'm assuming you don't know what a significant other is. It's also a diet bug. I reached for some sugar 2 weeks ago. The girl almost broke my neck. How dare you taste that horrible stuff? Now let me conclude, and I really mean this. Somewhere along the line, we made the wrong turn. Somewhere at the meeting of the fork of the road, we turned in the wrong direction. Integration was disaster. Still is. We misinterpreted it. We thought if we got physically close to people, we can soak up some knowledge through osmosis, which is a lie. What we need to do is to go back to that fork in the road, read those signboards of history one more time. History makes no exception in our case. We're going to have to do what all people had to do in order to move from subservient to freedom. We're going to have to begin to unify ourselves, love ourselves, protect ourselves, produce the things we eat and wear, and stop being apologetic about loving ourselves and giving preference to ourselves. And when we read those signboards at the fork of the road, when we see a sign that says, unity of the billion African people on the face of the earth, a great alliance of black and black that takes precedent over all other alliances. This is the first one. When we see the word African solidarity, When we see the word that we have to technically rescue Africa, it's going to take more than guns. It's going to take people who know how to build roads, stretch railroads across the belly of Africa, so that Africa can have vegetables from one side of Africa be on the other side before morning, overnight. A vast railroad system, go into the earth of Africa and take out the steel, go into the Sahara, dig under that sand and see what you can find. Go a little further up and dig under that sand and realize that a great nation, a great cluster of civilizations once existed in that area. Look at the evidence of that civilization. Start producing more than just researchers. We need teams of people, linguistics, archaeology, paleontology. We need everything. Take our young men out of jail and start them to building cities, give them a destiny. Pull them closer to us. And if we have to go back into a pattern that white people call tribalism, if it's benefit to you, go into it. Let them say what they want to. We have to become protective of each other. We have to get rid of blacks who said, none of your business, leave me alone. If you belong to us, you are our business. And if you pregnate a girl and walk away, don't you say it's none of your business. You don't support that girl. A number of black men who got enough strength on them gonna put a hurting on you. And they're not gonna apologize for having done so. They're not gonna take you to their law. They're gonna take you to our law. And we're gonna have it to do. I'm saying that we have to come together and first and foremost protect each other. We have to find that mirror and look into it and love what we see. Then when we read those signboards and see the word Pan-Africanism, the unification of African people all over the world, the organization of technology that would deliver Africa forever from the dependence on foreigners. When we see that on the signboard, when we see the arrows pointing to Africa, that's the road that's going to lead us home. When do we get on that road? Thank you.
We want to thank Dr. Clarke again. And at this time, we'd like to ask our other elder, Dr. Ben, to say a few words to us. Please, Dr. Ben.
I should say good evening. Sunday, a week ago, I had my most embarrassing moment of my 73 years. I was in the presence of the President of Egypt. I had returned to Egypt 3 days before the Friday to receive an award from the President of Egypt for contributions made to the state of Egypt. My embarrassment was I found myself the only African out of 14 people being awarded by the Arab state of of Egypt, and it would have been the same thing. And by a son of people who had come there 1,300 and odd years ago, whereas many would have considered it a great honor. I did it out of respect to the state, and the political viability in not doing this would have cost me the inability to function anymore at a point when I think that I need to do that much more. However, I understand that what happened last Sunday had started long ago in 1939, when I entered into the road of finding out what was the real history of the Nile Valley. Yesterday, Sunday, it meant the decision to make as to whether I wanted to be, my finality would be considered of what degrees or other titles I had from the white man, or whether or not I used the privilege of the white man's automation of me. For example, what I mean is whether I represent the three-piece suit I'm wearing. You must excuse me, please, because now the effects of my stroke have started to act 5 years later, 6 years later, because we're kind of wrapping up. I'm going through the process of, like most of us when we get up in this age, starting to bring down the curtain. But until such time, I'll continue. It had happened, and I used the analysis of this, is that when you decided that you are going to take on the Western society, when you were going to challenge its most precious certification, otherwise called degrees, when you were going to reject what they had taught you and being a fresh upstart, you must have realized that my father made it clear to me, if you're going to take this course, then you must take the course with the preparation of your cemetery and the preparation of your undertaker, and also the plot where you plan to stay. He didn't tell me in exact words, but he gave me the warning that if you try to fight the slave master, you must be willing to die at any given time. This was not just a literary promise. I started this very early. Some of you may not know, my mother's a Puerto Rican, my father's Ethiopian, and myself, I am an African. I need not to place the specific place in which my mother decided to give birth to me, but I will take my identity from the African people from whence I came. For in 1935, I decided to fight with the Puerto Rican nationalist movement as a student in University of Puerto Rico, where I joined Don Alviso Campo in fighting for the liberation of Puerto Rico against the United States of America, physically. Then, when the battleship Texas and the destroyer Talbot pointed their guns against us, the students, we were called black shirts, and leveled down a few hundreds of us on the wharf in Ponce. It meant for me a struggle that was physical as well as mental. So I understand many of my colleagues, otherwise called educators, who cannot understand me and I them. Because whereas I write and think in terms of gun and pen, they write in terms of pen, without guns. Whereas I don't believe in praying for solutions, but in killing for solutions. They believe in praying and waiting for some God to help them. I realized this too late. It was not until about 3 to 4 years ago I understand my major error. And my major error was to believe that most of us were ready for a revolution. We had been saying it all the time. But I found out that most of us are ready for only one kind of revolution, say it on TV. Whereas I was thinking of revolution with, instead of Saturday Night Special and Uzis on the subway, killing another 15-year-old or another old lady and taking away her money. I was thinking of Uzis and more than Uzis. I was thinking that anything that will kill a white man, that was something to apply. And that when I write on anything, it was to move people spiritually to kill. Now I realize that most to whom I was speaking was not ready for that. I asked myself, if I was to go in the Second World War and to fight to save white people, if I was to go, and that I did, unfortunately, if I was to go to save, in a war of my grandchildren to go to Iraq, to save Bechtel International, so that Bechtel International can be the first back in there, then why is it that I cannot, myself or my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren, take up the same arms and fight right here against the cracker who had been mistreating them all the time? This was sharpened to the nth degree. It was sharpened to the nth degree when myself, I should put myself last, I said, but what's the difference? When myself and Dr. John Henrick Clarke and others were, primarily the two of us, were put in magazines and book covers and newspapers as being the instigators who started the Jeffrey situation, which I don't feel at all regretful of, because when this was starting here, I was being crucified in Egypt at the same time, charged with treason and all kind of different things. Ironic that the same president now is giving me an award. But I knew then it was the time when I was looking for the so-called intellectual, African-American intellectual community to have come together, irrespective of affiliation, whether it be religious, education, or what you name it, that community, just like the Jews had come together. I'm talking about the white Jews. I don't care if it's Diane Redfish or anybody else. Yes, she's a Jew from Texas. I was looking for the African-American so-called intellectual, so-called classical scholars to have come together in mass and issue a statement supporting Dr. Jeffries, just as the Jews had issued a statement condemning him. I find, and I've found, that no statement came up to the present day. There has been hardly any professor of note within our group who have come out for Dr. Jeffries in any official manner. I wouldn't venture to say I'm number 1 or number 20 or 1 alone, but there have never been a time when I didn't do my duty to our African professor, whether he was in trouble in San Francisco, New York, you places, Barbados. To me, it doesn't matter where he was in things. And these things made me wound up a lone individual. I'm not going to take much of your time because I came set up just to say a few words, and a few words it will be. It was shameful for me to stand in front of Mubarak as the president of Egypt and could not say that there were in Egypt a number of African archaeologists digging in all kinds of places. Yet when I look around in Egypt, there are literally hundreds of Europeans and Asians digging all over Egypt. I understood that when they were going to make these major changes in archaeology in Egypt, accidentally my digs, the sites where I was digging is where they decided to put ramps and dump dirt. The sites where I was digging, coincidentally, happened to be where the military is going to have exercises. Therefore, they would put up their shooting ranges. I wasn't stupid not to understand what was happening. But most of all, symbolically, I brought with you a tube I was carrying, and I'm not going to disturb you at your break. You will see it. I had a special work done by the greatest Nubian architect of modern time, artists who have done a work. I'm proud to let you know that very soon the Nubian language, the written language of the Nubian will be sometime coming off. This year we will hope to have a big affair. It would not be an abortive celebration that we attempted to have last August without the support of the black community or the African community. That we could not get. But nevertheless, we are going to celebrate again the release of the written Nubian scripts. There are 4 Nubian scripts. I am proud to say that the affiliation between the University of Africa and Tuskegee University are going very well. The agriculture department is a joint department now, and you could get a joint degree. And that Howard University, conservative Howard University, is now going to join that program. Although I am proud to say that I am dismayed that ASCAC do not have a major role in this when it could have had the role in it. I'm a person who don't bite my tongue, as you know. Now, lastly, we need again, and as I said before, it is not enough to just quote our history. We must make that history. The going to Egypt may have seemed to many of you as either grandstanding or a means of manufacturing money. But I can assure you, it leaves a net each year. For those of you who have been with me understand what it is to maintain a village and maintain other things in the continent. And of course, I hope some of you could be with me when our first daughter in Egypt graduates from medical school next year from the village. That is one of the pluses from your contributions to the Bud village. But I still say, everybody knows who's an Egyptian, and probably I'm to be blamed for it, partly for that, but everybody doesn't know who's a Nubian. Of course, we think of a Nubian solely because I'm black, then that's nonsense, because how don't we think of the Egyptian in the same manner? He's black. I'm talking about the original Egyptian. So whereas at here we start to say, well, the Egyptian, we know this Egyptian because look how black he is. I don't see the distinction between a Sudanese or a Egyptian or a Somali or Ethiopian in terms of being black. At least you must excuse me for not recognizing the identification of a Nubian as against others by virtue of the tone or shade of one's skin in terms of black. So we, those of us at home, and I am back at home, those of us at home is wondering, why the isolation? Why Joseph ben Jochannan? And I'm going to change that. I hope, and I'm trying, earlier than the end of this day, Joseph will disappear, Ben Jochannan will disappear, and AA will disappear, and PhD will disappear. Well, that's gone already. People use it to me, but I never use it. I am an African. I do respect what my mother and father had done. They being black Hebrews, they thought they were doing the best for me. Though my father put me on the path towards understanding myself and background, he too, like myself in some area, had certain things that we needed to correct. He needed to correct. And one was calling me by a Hebrew name. I carried that from birth. By the way, they stigmatized me and called me Joseph. And then they called me Alfredo Antonio in memory of my father, my mother's two brothers, uncles rather. And lastly, my father's name, Jochannan, with the Ben. Neither of those names belong to me. I am an African, I'm not Hebrew. My God did not come among Sinai. Even if Moses carried there, Jesus or Muhammad or who else. As an African, if I'm to have a deity, it must be either female or male or both deities of Africa. And they must carry African names. Just as my children carry African names. Just as my grandchildren and great-grandchildren and those who cannot take on African names will have to leave my family. I don't need them. What we have to do, in my opinion, doesn't have to be yours, is this understanding that in a war, we use any method possible. And in a war, we must do definite things as people in war. If I am in war, I have to fight anyone on the opposite side, if it be my mother or my father. Anyone on the opposite side is my enemy. And I have no friendly enemy. My enemy is my enemy is my enemy, in spite of who that individual is. And I close. I am looking to see what statement is going to come from this conference in terms of Leonard Jeffries. To make sure that I am not an agent of Leonard Jeffries, I haven't seen him in weeks and don't know what he's doing more than some newspaper and that you can't believe. So it has nothing to do with that. But I am saying, since nobody has, no organization, even those that his membership, household membership, have done anything all this length of time, I do hope that this one will be courageous enough to come up with a statement with the official seal of this organization. You see, sure, it may cause you to have to dissolve by the pressures of certain individuals. That is a possibility. But men and women are men and women. You don't worry if you're going to lose your femaleship or your maleship if you do something. When your femaleship and maleship is the integrity that shows you to be men and women. It is better to lose that symbol of manhood or womanhood and to gain the dignity and respect of all people that you are men and women. I don't know any other way to say what I had to say for the few moments when I was asked, because I really didn't know I would be back here. When I left, I told Brother Bill and Sister Kefa that I was called to come back to be in Egypt to this coming Sunday. I was fortunate enough to get a seat to return and decide that I will be here. My wife represented me yesterday, and unfortunately today she has to go to one of those European functions at the Sheraton Hotel. I really told her that the Sheraton should not matter, it's not important, but they had already paid $50. I think we have to make a decision between the $50, I guess it's mine $50. We have to make a decision with what is more important at the particular time. And it is difficult for us to do these things. So I said to you, alas, I said sometime in 1987, I think it was 87 or 88 in Aswan, that I was leaving ASCAC. And I wouldn't be back until I think there would be sufficient changes in the administration that would warrant my consideration that the organization is in the hand of the people. It seems as if, I don't know if no, I guess I'll stick to my original. I was going to show you something, but I wouldn't do it because it might take too much of the time. I have to ask the President.
Take your time.
If Sister Kefa would bring the tube up or send somebody, I will do that, because this is going to the Schomburg collection.
That's great.
But I said what I had said. Since that time, I had come one or two times visiting ASCAC. I've always lent support to the New York office whenever they call upon me. But I didn't return to ASCAC.
You're home now.
It is always something unusual about African women. They not only bring you in this world,
That's
what you get.
Oh, got it. Oh.
I guess you got to come up there.
Let's come in the center.
Excuse me. Okay.
This is done by Nubia's greatest artists of the 20th century, showing the Nubian concept of goddess Nut. And it's a special, and it took him 4 months to do it. And it is symbolic of your current leader. From what I see from the New York office, the New York group, and as I said, I shared some moments with them in the study groups. Though I may not be able to be with you often because, as you know, my new home, or my old home, I went back home to Egypt. I can't be as often as I would like to be. I would, if it is necessary for a man of 73 to pay dues, I would again reapply to ASCAC. And I would like a regular membership. I want no special privileges. As you know,
$25.
yes, I will pay the $25 before I leave the stage.
All right.
I am asking you one thing, however. There is no connection officially between ourselves here in the West and there in Nubia-Egypt. This large one. The last statue that you just, painting of Nut that you've just seen, I am asking you one favor, that picture, that papyrus, be adopted by this organization, and in its adoption, that at an appropriate day before June comes around, the end of school, that this picture be presented to the Schomburg collection in New York officially, with an appropriate function in showing and representing the relationship between the African people, the Nubian people in America, and Nubian people at home in Nubia. I will try to have Mr. Eldin, who has just been made by the Egyptian government the head of all antiquities in Egypt. You all might have known him of the man in charge of antiquities in Aswan Governorate. He is now in charge of the entire antiquities for the nation of Egypt. He's a Nubian brother who some of you have met. And I'm going to see if I could get Mr. Abdim to be here when that presentation is being made.
Yes, please. We have one more, Dr.
The one that you have just seen, there, of course, is the judgment scene by the same artist, and there is a last one. This last one is unique. I would like Brother Jake Carradas, who have fought many times on the floor,
Yay!
and may be necessary to fight him again. That's brothers. When brothers could fight and don't kill each other, and come back to say, I am going to ask Brother Jake Carradas to hold this. And from the Nubian people at home, And from Nubian people at home, and I am going to ask Brother John Henry Clarke to come also forward. Sister Kefa? Sister Kefa? Oh, not here? And then I'm going to ask the president of ASCAP to come forward. And I'm asking Brother Jake Carruthers to come forward and present to the woman who now leads ASCAC this, so that every time she sees this woman, that is Nefertari, and I hope that you stop wearing the chain of Nefertiti, who is not an African, and that your artists start making chains of Nefertari, the wife of Ramesses II. The goddess leading her is goddess Het Heru, which you call Hathor, and the two goddesses in the background are the twin sisters, goddess Nebda, which you call Nephthys, and goddess Aset or Ast, which you call Isis. This I turn to you, hoping you and wishing you not only a goodness in your stewardship of this organization, but hoping that your marriage, which I unfortunately could not attend, will be blessed, and if the heavens be typical to Africans, that there be a whole string, a little presidents in your family. All right. So, again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ben to coming and participating in this morning's program. And also special thank you and say from the bottom of my heart, and I'm sure I'm speaking for you too, to tell Dr. Ben, welcome home. You found your family in a peaceful place. I have a couple of announcements, and I hope they're not late. One is a red Geo. If you have a red Geo, they're towing it away. That was 20 minutes ago. The other one is there's a Maryland car out there with license plates WL6198. You're probably towed away. That was 25 minutes ago. So if you have a red Geo and you think it might still be out there, could you please go move it? And then also the Maryland license plate with WL6198, you can move yours too. I think if it's been told, we might even take up a collection because, you know, it was so good I didn't want to interrupt Dr. Ben in his statement. Okay, we have words of welcome from a young brother who worked, he worked effortlessly with us all, trying to get this conference together. He's a young brother, he's attending Rutgers University. We were first supposed to have the conference there, but due to some problems, we thought it would be better to move the conference here. And so we'd like right now, because this brother is still working with us, working on behalf of African liberation, to please come forward and give us a warm welcome, Brother Baye. You look wonderful, don't you, sister?
Hotep.
Hotep.
I bring greetings to you, my African elders, my African children, my African brothers and sisters, from the newly formed United African Student Government at Rutgers University in Newark. And for those of you who do not know the complexities of bringing you this conference, who do not know the long and hard work that was put into it for preparation of this conference, and the other struggles that consumed the valuable time in the Newark community, I would like to add you a little insight. Initially, this conference was scheduled to be held at Rutgers University in Newark. But because of a newly and economically exploitative security policy at Rutgers, the student organization was forced to change the location. The university is saying because of the City College program that every program that we have must have security. We all know that this is in collaboration, the university police and the administration at Rutgers to keep a financial check on the organizations by saying that each program must have security, and security at bare minimum is $150 for one police officer. If you're saying you're going to have a conference with 500 people, that's over $450. Thus, you have a check on the organization where they cannot have these type of programs. Yeah. Thus, the organizations are forced to cancel programs, i.e. Dr. Jeffries, Dr. Ben, and Dr. Clarke. Myself and a few students